All right, so we're gonna review the adapter pattern and implementing an adapter that allows you to adapt two interfaces, one that is targeted to interacting with the database and another interface that is targeted to interacting with an XML file, an XML document file. Right? And we'll try to implement one in terms of the other, extending the implementation of the other and implementing the interfaces of the one. Okay? So first of all, we'll as I mentioned earlier, we'll be creating a little application that needs to talk to a database, needs to talk to XML documents and whatnot. So a couple of new libraries that you might or might not be familiar with. One library to talk to a database and another library so that we can talk to XML documents. For that, I'm going to use a framework that's it's very popular today, Spring Boot. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to play around with that. That allows you to, brings on many different libraries that can be used to easily connect to a database, easily connect to XML documents, also easily connect to network resources anywhere on the internet. And so I'm going to create a project. I'll call it the CS3500 project using the Spring Boot command line interface. So let's do that. Let's see, where am I? All right, so we're under CS3500, and here we'll create a new project, and will be a Spring init dependencies. We'd like to be able to connect to the web and the internet, and also we'd like to be able to connect to a database using the database library called JPA Java Persistence API. It's an API that allows you to connect to persistent storage like databases. Yes. And we'll call the project DB to XML adapters. Failed. Am I not connected to? I'm not connected to the internet. Let me connect. And you? That's slow. Yeah, that one. Okay. So that's going to download a template for a project, and let's open it up with our favorite projects here. Let's see, under 3500, and there it is. So let's open that up. All right. So while that's going on, hopefully it'll parse it. There we go. It parsed it for us. There's a couple things here. We have a source directory which is what you would expect. And here's where the main code would go is under Java, and there's one main class to get the whole thing started and running. All right, so let's start playing around with this. We'll need to create a database. Actually, I already did create a database. I called it CS3500. Right? It has a single table. The table contains two columns. The table is called courses, and it has two columns: a primary key and the title of courses. And I have two courses in there. I have CS5610 and I have CS3500, the two courses I'm teaching. And also in the titles I put -json next to it, yes? Because we're going to create another XML document that has also a couple of courses. And so that we can distinguish where we're getting the data from, I've tagged these JSON, and I'm going to tag those as XML. Right, so that we can make sure that we are retrieving the data from the right place. Okay. Right. So we have this data in our database, and we'd like to be able to retrieve this right from this database running on MySQL. So to do that, we need to configure our application to be able to connect to a database. We need to tell the project saying, well, here's the database I want you to connect, and here's a username and password to log into the database, and all sorts of things. Yes, all right. So I have a cheat sheet for that, and so here's a configuration for it. we can configure where the data source is. It's available at localhost 3306. That's a standard MySQL, and it's the database is 3500 CS 3500. The login and password, I created a user with root access. It's a DBA, can do everything. They can insert, update, delete, everything. So I called it the user CS 3500. Same password, very secure. Also, I'm configuring the project so that instead of me having to create these tables, even though the table's already created, it would have created the tables for me, right? It would allow me to only declare the Java classes, and all sorts of magic would happen that would map the Java classes, the Java plain old Java objects would map them to a table of the same name, right? And the fields would map them to the fields. So internally, it has its own little adapter, right? This framework has all sorts of adapters internally that convert between all sorts of different ways of representing the data. And we can configure that adapter to do all sorts of things, such as create the tables for me, drop all the data and recreate the tables for me, or just update, do incremental updates to the database. A couple other things. We can see the SQL, the structured query language commands going back and forth. It's for debugging. It's great. It's fun to watch as the Java tries to communicate with the database and it sends back and forth commands. The other is also a part of kind of like an adapter pattern. One of the mantras in Java is that you code once and you run anywhere, right? That's the mantra, that you're coding towards a thin layer of a JVM, right? And you don't really care where you compile to. If you compile down to for Windows or Mac OS or any operating system, that's done for you, right? Once you compile, it compiles everything for you. So Java attempted to do the same thing for everything else, like databases, so that you don't have to deal with the idiosyncrasies of any particular vendor. Java creates adapters. Again, the adapter pattern. Adapters where each vendor can create adapters for their own vendors. So Oracle has an adapter. MySQL has an adapter. SQL Server has an adapter, right? And for Java, you just code to a standard API. Everything all implemented on interfaces. And these folks, right? These vendors just implement these interfaces, right? And at runtime, you get the right adapter based on this configuration. It says, well, what do you want to connect to? Is it Oracle? Is it MySQL? Is it SQL Server? What are you connecting to, right? And that's the class, the implementation class that I want to use at runtime, right? So that's the implementation class of the interface. So lots and lots of adapter layers in between. A couple other things. A couple of naming conventions, more adapters. Internally, each vendor has its own SQL dialect, right? So Oracle adds a couple of commands and a couple of abstractions in their SQL that MySQL doesn't have, right? Or that Postgres doesn't have, right? And they compete that way, right? Try to differentiate between themselves. So what these adapters allow you to do is say, well, give me a canonical command, and I'll convert it into whatever dialect you want, right? I can speak Oracle, I can speak Postgres, I can speak MySQL, I can speak any dialect, right? Just give me a canonical representation of the command, and I'll convert it for you, right? Again, lots and lots of adapters here. A couple more things for configuring some for debugging purposes. Print out in the console and everything you're doing, so that we can keep track of what you're doing, so that we can debug if we don't like what you're doing. A couple other things. I believe we already have that. In the POM file, anybody have used POM file before? They're configuration files that allow allow projects, Java projects, to declare dependencies and say, well, I need all these other libraries. Please download all these libraries for me, right? And put them in a known place on my machine, so I can then compile against these libraries. Yes. So POM is a standard that in what are referred to as Maven projects that follow a particular standard. So in particular, we need the library to talk to a database. The data JPA library. I believe we have that already. But because I'm going to talk to MySQL, that's the database I want to talk to, I also need the library that allows me to compile against the implementation classes of talking to a database, so the driver classes. So I don't believe I have that, so I'll copy this in. So I'll copy this dependency into my POM file. So the POM file declares some libraries that I'm inheriting from a parent project, a template project. Tells me what version of Java I'm using, whether I'm using JPA. There it is. I'm already using that. That I can connect to the database, to the web, and also I have a whole bunch of test framework harness to be able to test this. Plus, I'll add the MySQL connector here. It's an older version. 5.146. There's much newer versions, up to like 8 or something. So I need to update my SQL version. Anyway, so I think that's it. That's all I need to configure on the project. Let's just start looking at starting to actually do the data model. All right. So let's discuss that.